You're listening to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall on CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. And Jim, I'm going to start with this post-Bill 40 story. I don't know if we could have seen this coming, but Eric Duhem, of all people, leader of the Provincial Conservative Party, coming out today and basically saying, in his opinion, and I guess that of his party, he doesn't think the CAQ government should appeal the ruling in Bill 40, which gives English school boards, of course, the right to control their own education. And I'm curious, my first reaction was, where are the Liberals on this? Why were they the ones to come out and say this?
That's a good question.
I need you guys to understand. First of all, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, because we lost, when I was on before, we lost contact. But I want you guys to understand that ever since the Liberal Roadshow, the Liberal Revival Roadshow got underway, I have devoted one full column to the X account, formerly the Twitter account, of the Quebec Liberal Party to address the very questions that you're asking me right now. And my short answer is beats the poop out of me because they haven't said a word about it. and this is not an Anglo story. This is a Quebec story. This is a court decision that also calls into question the government's ambition to take over the administration of schools, which they've done, scot-free with French language school boards. But if we go back to Eric Duhem, it wasn't that long ago. He was on this very show saying that Bill 96 should be rescinded, that it was an unnecessary exacerbation of relations between Francos and Anglos in Quebec. He's essentially saying the same thing now. And, of course, the fundamental question is why. And I would respectfully submit that Mr. Duhem, who has made it quite clear, he is ready to poach any disaffected MNA to come into his party so they can have the Quebec Conservatives can have some presence in the National Assembly. I think he basically sees the flies circling over the Liberal Party. We experienced in the last election campaign a lot of people calling into this show saying, I'm going to give this Duhem guy a look. The Conservatives seem to be doing more for me than the Liberals. Mm-hmm. In the end, that didn't exactly materialize. But I think with each passing day, with each passing a thunderous silence from the Quebec Liberals, I think people like Eric Duhem are saying, you know what, I might be able to do well over there. I realize that now the Quebec Liberal Party is in fact the West Island Liberal Party, but even then, I might be able to score some points. And I don't suggest that he's insincere in his criticisms of Bill 40 and why the government should not appeal it, but I also think he sees a golden opportunity here to try and get himself back on the map. Let's face it, the Conservatives' numbers have dropped since the last election. They underperformed. They got a fair amount of the popular vote, but once again, because of our system, they got no seats. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think the big news here, though, is that if you're willing to sort of, wrestle over the remains, there might be some pickings to be had from the Quebec Liberal Party, whether the Quebec Liberal Party likes it or not. We'll see if that materializes. I mean, it'd be fascinating to see as well how everybody's going to do in Jean Talon riding in the by-election. But, yeah, I think Eric Duhem has simply said out loud what a lot of people may be thinking in politics and elsewhere, which is, how, clearly the body's cold. How long until we bury it?
So he's going to be on with Elias tomorrow after 10 o'clock. One of the biggest criticisms of him has constantly been that he just does anything to try and stay in the public eye, right, and get a little bit of publicity. Yeah. So there's no chance that people are just going to roll their eyes and be like, okay, you're on board to Anglo support because it's going to get you some more attention.
I think, first of all, and I'm not trying to be flip here, and I understand what you're saying, Natasha, mm-hmm. but, that tactic worked for a former United States president.
Yeah, sure.
And I think in this day and age, as I've said repeatedly on this show, people's attention spans are rather more limited than they used to be. And in many cases, anger will be a driving force behind your political choices. I can't think of anybody who's got more right to be angry or at least ridiculously frustrated than Anglos living in Quebec. And if Eric Duhem sees that and wants to exploit that, I don't think he's behaving radically different from any other politician in this province or another. But all that said, I think at the moment, the fact that he's sort of like piping up about Bill 40 speaks volumes more about the Liberals and their future than Eric James and the Conservative Party.
You know, Jim, maybe I'm living in a bit of a sort of an altered reality here, but I think to myself, so here's the guy who sort of kicked off this discussion, which is something, as I said, we've thought of, right? When the bill came out, when the ruling came out, rather, we thought, well, will they appeal? And the obvious answer is, yeah, in all likelihood they will. But imagine that the rest of the opposition, I'm going to leave the PQ out of that, got together and said, you know, with respect to what Mr. Duhem has said, if the Liberals say we agree with that, and Quebec Solidaire came on and said we agree with that as well. I mean, it was ruled unconstitutional by a judge in this province. Could you see that happening?
Eventually, I'm not entirely sure. Quebec Solidaire is in fact living in this universe or an alternate universe. But and as for the Liberals, if somebody shakes somebody awake and mentions what's happened, perhaps they will, take a stand on this. But I just find it interesting that, as we have observed just now, that so far Eric James is the only Quebec politician that I can see who has in fact reacted to this, and to address your alternate universe as well. I don't think it'll make a difference. In fact, it would probably accelerate the appeal process, because we know when Francois Legault gets challenged on anything whatsoever, he just quadruples down. So this is going to go up to the Supreme Court. Will there be more people jumping on this from the opposition parties? If they're smart, I think they would, because I said this is not an Anglo story. But all that said, everyone seems to have their own agenda right now, and one of the problems that we have in this province is that we've got a virtually equal division between the opposition parties. So, and you're right, even if two of them spoke with one voice, or three of them, that might be, in terms of political significance, important for the voters in Quebec. But I don't think it's going to change the outcome of anything. The CAQ will appeal this and find all kinds of reasons. And I got very angry when this judgment came down as well, because this is a garbage law. But, like most of their garbage laws, the CAQ will fight to the last notwithstanding clause to maintain it.
Let's talk about this by-election in Jean Talon, Quebec Solidaire, the president coming out and saying, please put a woman in there, and that is exactly what did not happen.
Well, excuse me if I'm cackling here, Natasha, but you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly.
And how Quebec Solidaire, the executive, was basically saying, we strongly recommend that you choose a female candidate for this riding, which was interesting because this was to address, a political abstract, which is to say we want gender parity in our caucus. So the more we can do to get women elected as MNAs, the better off we'll be. It seems that the eligible voters, Quebec Solidaire members, blew that out the airlock, and in fact elected Olivier Bolduc, who we discussed. He's a guy. He ran the last time in Jean Talon. He's run in I think 3 other elections in the Quebec City area, and I'm really wondering whether more damage was done to Quebec Solidaire and its endeavors to increase the presence of women in its caucus by this kind of imposition. I know the party had a convention last February. They said, we should actually create conditions where the candidacies of women would be imposed on certain, winnable ridings. But I think it just rubbed people the wrong way. I don't think any riding association, and there's a few Trudeau Liberals who can tell you that, federal Liberals who can tell you that, they don't like being told who to vote for and who to choose. Yeah. In the end, will it work out? Will Monsieur Bolduc win in Jean Talon? In the end, that is all that's going to be what matters in this whole debate. But once again, if he comes in second, and can you imagine what a chuckle it would be if the winner in Jean Talon is a woman? That might be poetic justice as well. But I think in this particular instance, whereas their intentions were good, their methodology was as subtle as a sledgehammer, and some people don't like being treated that way.
Jim, real quick, got a minute here. So tell me what you think of this whole Justin Trudeau post, the Barbie thing, going to the movie with his son, after asking that, of course, we kind of leave him alone for a while in the wake of the separation between him and Sophie Gregoire.
Well, first of all, anything that makes a Brit blowhard like Piers Morgan say he's glad he's not Canadian is okay with me. But it's fascinating because here's Justin Trudeau, his son Xavier, saying we're Team Barbie, and Xavier is wearing a kind of a kind of violet magenta kind of sweatshirt. Trudeau is wearing a sort of off salmon hoodie. And he knew perfectly well what he was doing. It was the comments that followed, the tsunami of homophobic, misogynistic, just knuckle-dragging comments at the bottom. And I would respectfully submit that what Justin Trudeau did was a 5-star troll, and the message was this: I may annoy you, I may drive you round the bend with my self-righteousness, but take a look at these comments and tell me if you want what is bubbling on the other side of this wall to start running our country.
It's weirdly brilliant.
James Mennie, Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Adam.